So I try not to be political, but sometimes the challenges we face require political and societal solutions. And at the moment we're in the midst of a pandemic, a once in 100-year event. But the last one was 1918, which was over 100 years ago, so it makes me think, why weren't we prepared for it? And the pandemic's sort of been forced upon us, and it's caused us to act, and act quickly. But I just worry about the government's handling of the pandemic, and I sort of align that to environmental policies and the threats that are facing biodiversity, the environment, and ourselves as a species. So there's no doubt that governments across the world have had to make tough decisions, and we've definitely seen the good, the bad and the ugly. But you've probably noticed one thing, that all governments like to share the positives and the good news, and it takes us to delve into research and delve into the science to actually see how bad things are. And I really worry that this is happening with climate change too. So if you think of the UK, they were the first country to declare a climate emergency and say that they'll be carbon neutral by 2050. But when you look at the independent science, that dates 20 years into the future compared to the date which scientists say we need to be carbon neutral by. And that really worries me. We've also seen our own government miss their own tree planting target by 79%. We've just had a great opportunity to make fishing more sustainable, yet the new fisheries bill has taken the word sustainable fisheries out of it. So again, these are things I really worry about. And with how many governments are set up for 4 or 5 year parliaments, governments and politicians really lack the foresight for future events. They really care about that term in parliament. And I'm not blaming them for that. I guess it's human nature. In our own lives, you know, we look a few years ahead and perhaps not 10, 15, 20 years ahead. But I think when we think about climate change and environmental destruction, we really need to see ourselves as a group, as social species, indeed as a species rather than individual people. It's really time we start looking towards future generations, because we know, and we can't deny it, that the things we're doing now, the negative actions or the lack of positive actions, are really going to have an impact on the planet and indeed people. So another problem with politics, and when we have like short-term or 5-year parliaments, I mean, that's not good for democracy in one sense because we can choose our leaders more often. But one of the other problems is it makes politicians quite reluctant to admit when they've been wrong. And it's only when we admit we've done something wrong can we learn from our mistakes and make better policies. But because we're sort of stuck into these fixed terms, and governments are sort of run by PR, and the media is probably focused on tripping politicians up, then this can be a problem in itself. I think sometimes in society and in politics it's just okay to put our hands up and say, do you know, we got it wrong, so we can change things. Because if we don't do that, then the small things we get wrong become big things we get wrong, and that's when we have severe problems and we almost get into the territory where it's too late to fix things, or things are never going to go back to what they were. And the pandemic and climate change, although they're fundamentally different threats, they both stem out of exploitation of nature and the environment, and the consequence, human death, is the same result. The only difference is the pandemic's happened in a year. We're still not out of it yet, but governments' hands have been forced. People were dying. Action had to be taken. With climate change, we are seeing some of the effects in the UK. Probably more effects than you can think of, especially in terms of change of weather, effects on food production, increased coastal flooding, migration of species. But as of yet in the UK, it's not really having an impact on human life. Pollution, on the other hand, we've just seen the first case of someone having air pollution on their death certificate in London, which is a massive shock for a Western country. So we all love animals, and we all watch programmes on the BBC by David Attenborough, and we probably get upset when we hear of species decline. And the loss of biodiversity is a major issue. But actually, we can look at an orangutan going extinct and just say, oh, poor orangutan, it's a shame that that species has gone extinct. What these programmes don't do, or don't do as strongly as perhaps scientists would like, is really link it to the human impacts. Now, over the last few years, they've been doing this more and more, so credit should be given. But I suppose as a programme maker, when people start being told what to do or how to act, they probably turn off. They don't want to hear it. And again, it probably goes back to politicians. They want popular policies and not those that are going to make a difference. So this pandemic has really opened my eyes up more to this and linked the dealing of coronavirus to the dealing of environmental policy. So I'm fortunate because I know about environmental policy, I know about the environmental impacts, and I'm all too aware of how it's often hidden away in the news. It's hidden away in programmes. You know, it's not really mentioned in EastEnders or Coronation Street or anything like that. And that's quite worrying, because it says to me it's not really a societal issue, when actual fact it's the opposite. It's probably the biggest societal issue that we're facing and have faced for a long time. When we think about coronavirus as well, we just got to remember these pandemics are now going to become more and more frequent, and again that's due to the exploitation of nature and the lack of respect for the environment. But there is hope, and I guess all too often hope is the only thing we have. And we know through changes throughout society, whether it be gender equality, whether it be racial equality, although it still exists, we know that it's taken small percentages of the population to change, to drive mass change. And that's probably my great hope with the environmental movement. You know, when you have mainstream media bullying a 15-year-old at the time because she's speaking out about the environment, you know that they're covering something up. You know she's hit a nerve. When you see environmental protesters being labelled as uneducated or hippies, you know they've hit a nerve. But I challenge anyone to listen to their arguments and actually come back with a scientific counter to their argument, one which is based on facts rather than opinion. And again, this is what's often missing in politics today. And there's absolutely no reason why we can't turn our economy into a green economy. The UK is really set up for it. We know successive governments have sort of ripped the heart out of manufacturing in our country, and that's one way we can get back to being more green, by making things on our own shores. And I just find some things ridiculous, like we send our recycling to Indonesia, when actually we can recycle it on our own shores, creating an income, creating jobs, and creating raw materials that we need. We sent an old warship to Korea to be dismantled. You know, that could have been employment on our own shores, and it would have saved a lot of fuel and a big carbon footprint, literally shipping it off to the other side of the world. Sweden used to produce many of our wind farms. Again, we could look inwards and produce our own wind farms, creating jobs and creating a green revolution. So I think in the UK it's not all doom and gloom, because one of the positives is we have some of the best universities and some of the best entrepreneurs in the world. So I think if we started looking to them and looking to scientists and looking to these bright minds, you know, the solutions are staring us in the face, and the economy doesn't have to suffer as a result of positive environmental change. In fact, it's the opposite. It could really thrive and benefit us all. And it would be egotistical to say that I have the solutions, because I don't. But what we need to do is start looking for these solutions and looking at them with an intent of solving the issues, rather than just glossing over them and offering soundbite policies. So just to finish, I'm going to put a challenge out to you guys, and I really want you to look inwards at your own lives And just think about the small changes you can make, which will really have a positive impact on the environment. Whether it's the bigger issues, such as flying, or whether it's the simple things we can do, such as rewilding our garden. We are the hope, we owe it to future generations, and it's something we can do quite quickly if we work together and act now.